You know, it's an incredible opportunity anytime that people begin to talk about church planting. If you're new to church at all or you're not accustomed to the terminology, you can hear the phrase church plant, and you might even ask the question, what kind of a plant is that? I don't know that I don't even know that I've heard of a church plant. Well, really what that means is it's expressing the heart of this house to start and develop new churches. And anytime you can be a part of a church that has a commitment to launch and develop, AKA plant, new churches, you know you're in a great church and you know you found a great church home. So you have found a great church home because of their belief in starting new churches and getting new churches off of the ground. This church at one point started that exact same way. It was a brand new church. And I just happen to believe this, that the church in America is really important. I believe that the church was the idea of God, and the church is the hope that we really need in this life. Obviously, the true hope's through Jesus, but what you see established in the New Testament is this paradigm of the development of church. And so the launching of churches and development of new churches and being a part of a church that believes in that lets you know you are in a great place. But to launch new churches and to develop new churches and to plant new churches, believe it or not, is one of the most challenging things to do. It is one of the hardest things to do. The fact you're sitting in here in a building tells you something about this incredible leadership couple, because the statistics vary on this, but they'll tell you that 85 to 90% of churches that are plants, new churches, fail in the first 6 to 12 months. They fail in the first 6 to 12 months. And so we need to make sure that we are launching and developing and sending out people to launch new churches. And I remember we had been in ministry about 15 or 16 years, and God began to speak to us about the potential of planting or launching a church. And it's kind of funny that even when you tell people that you're going to start a new church, they go, "Oh, that's sweet. That's so nice that you're going to do that. God bless your soul," And then, we would tell them where we're going to do it. Well, where are you going to do that? Everybody wants to know, where are you going to do it? Are you going to go to a nice place, a beautiful place like Seattle? No, we're going to go to Vegas. They go, "Oh, really? What? Why would one want to do that?" That's a great question. I'm not sure, and I'm still working on the answer to it. But it's amazing. And when Brandon said, I want you to share about your church plant story. I want you to share about the journey that God took you and Priscilla on as you started this church in Vegas. I want you to share it with our church a little bit. And when God began to speak to us about launching a new church, it was probably the worst time that he could have done it. And here's the reason why it's the worst time that he could have done it. Isn't this how God is? He just kind of does things the way he wants and doesn't really check with you. It's like, I don't really care what you want. This is what I'm going to, it's up to you if you're going to do it, but this is what I want you to do. And here's why it was so inconvenient for God to speak to us in the moment in which he did, because we were in probably one of the best places that we had ever been in our life. What I mean by that is we were living in a city that we really liked. We were living in a home that we really liked. We were making, for the first time or early on in it, some good money. We were making a good income at that point in time. The city that we lived in, our kids loved it. My son was born in the city that we lived in. And then God began to speak to us in that season about a different season, about leaving behind the home and leaving behind the church and leaving behind the security, because at that point in time, we were serving at a very large church and we were doing some great things and God was moving and it was amazing. And so at that time, for God to say this to us was a bit challenging. It was something that you could write off as indigestion or bad pizza, or maybe you just saw something one day, you're like, "Oh, that's a good idea." Not for me, but it's a good idea. There's a lot of different ways you could write off God beginning to speak to you to do something like starting a new church, because in the church world, in the ministry world that we've been a part of for about 15 years, the consensus is people that start new churches are crazy. That people that do that have a screw loose up there, because there's no reason that you'd leave a perfectly good church to go start one from nothing. Go take one over that's already there. Don't start one from scratch. Don't do that. Clearly, there's something malfunctioning in your process for you to want to get out and do something like that. But there was this thing that most people don't know about us. When we were about 20, 21 years old, we told God something. And this is what we told them. God, we give you our life. We will go anywhere you want us to go. And we will do anything you want us to do. And we will say anything that you want us to say. And the crazy thing about it is God actually took us up on that. And he began to ask us to go to parts of the country that I never thought we would live in. He began to put us in environments and situations that we never thought we'd be a part of. So we had a track record of responding to God when he asked us to respond, even though it wasn't always easy to do. And many times we loved the place where we were, but God would speak to us to do something new. And he began to speak to us again about a new season. And here's what will happen. Anytime that God speaks to you about something, anytime God will begin to unveil something on the inside of you, to speak to your mind, to speak to your spirit, you will have to make a decision. And you will have to battle the tension between what is and what can be. And for a lot of people, to decide to pursue what can be is always negated by what is. A lot of times we look at what is and go, man, what could be is amazing, but what is really good. I love my what is. I love the situation that I'm in. I love the environment that I am in. I love what is. I love what we have. I love what we've built. I love the environment. I love what's been created. And sometimes what you have is really good, but is it getting in the way of what could be? Because I love what is, but God was showing us you have a good what is, but I want you to begin to dream and imagine what could be. And I get it if your what is good. And so to leave behind what is for what could be feels like a risk. But there are some people that their what isn't even any good. Your what isn't even that great, but it is predictable. Your what isn't even something that you like to tell people about, but at least you know what to expect. You're like, I don't know what could be, but at least in this environment, and in this situation, he doesn't treat me good, but at least I know it's coming. I know how this person's going to come home. I know where they've been, but at least I know what's coming. My what isn't even that good, but I can predict it. I kind of know what's going to happen, and the way that I'm wired up is I don't like unpredictability. I don't like the sensation of not being able to control my environment. And so my environment isn't that good, but at least I can control it. And so because I can control it, I know what to expect and I know how to plan my days. But I'm telling you, if you were to really give aspects of your life over to God, you would see that maybe your what isn't even that good. Why not dare dream about what could be? So you will have to navigate the tension between what is and what can be. It happened even in the life of Peter in Matthew 16, verses 21, 22, and 23. Jesus is having this conversation with his disciples, and you got to process through who these disciples were prior to Jesus. They were fishermen. They were kind of average, kind of run-of-the-mill people. They didn't really have significance when it comes to how the environment or how the culture would see them. And all of a sudden, they're raised to prominence, and they're known as the disciples of Jesus, and they're traveling around Israel, and they're seeing signs and wonders and miracles, and it's first-hand witness account, and it's just like, yeah, this is what life's about. This is amazing. And then Jesus in Matthew 16 is about to have this conversation with his key people, and he's about to tell them that things are about to change. He's about to tell them and unveil the plans that God has for him, that our time that we've had together the last number of years is coming to a conclusion, and what's about to happen is I'm going to go to the cross, and it's going to be this life-changing event for all of us. And look what it says right here in Matthew 16, 21 through 23. It says, from then on, Jesus began to tell his disciples plainly that it was necessary for him to go to Jerusalem, and that he would suffer many terrible things at the hands of the elders and leading priests and teachers of the religious law. And he would be killed, but on the third day, he would be raised from the dead. Now look at your boy Peter right here. But Peter took him aside and began to reprimand him for saying such things. Peter has the nerve and the audacity to pull Jesus aside and say, let me tell you what's up. Let me reprimand God for a minute. That's how you know you're not processing or seeing the world quite right, where you're going to pull God aside and reprimand him for something he's trying to do. But in reality, don't we do that too? Don't we do that too? And look what he says right here to Jesus. Got to set him straight, because clearly Jesus has lost his mind right here. He says, heaven forbid, Lord, this will never happen to you. Now look at Jesus' response. Jesus turned to Peter and said, get away from me, Satan. What? I don't know if you're Peter, you're like, Satan. Are we changing my name again? Because you already changed my name once. Is this a new one? Peter was good. I don't know if I'm going to go with Satan on this one, Lord. I feel like it's going to cause problems for me on social media. I don't know how this is going to go down, with the guys. I was Peter and now I'm Satan. And that's a little, it's probably going to be a problem. And what are you talking about? Like, really? And Jesus looks at him and he goes, you are a dangerous trap to me. Look what he says here. Why? You are seeing things merely from a human point of view and not from God's. What would make Peter pull Jesus aside and reprimand him? What he was saying is Peter was talking to Jesus. He was saying, Jesus, I like what is. I like the way things are. I like what we've built. I like what we have developed. I like what is. And Jesus was saying, it's not about what is, it's what can be. And that's why Jesus was saying, Satan, you got to get back. And Jesus directly communicates to who's communicating to him. He realizes it's not even Peter talking, because the enemy wants to come in and get you off track and keep you away from what God would want for you. And what he's saying is, Peter, you got to realize what's happening here. I'm embracing what can be. You're holding on to what is. And a lot of times the greatest thing that we will ever have to overcome is, can we step into what can be, which means leaving behind what is. So Jesus has this moment. Peter has this moment. And Peter was saying, I have significance now. I'm a kind of a big deal now, Jesus. When people see me, I'm not just some fisherman anymore. They know I'm connected to you. When we show up in cities, I don't want to leave behind what is. And God began to say, I'm moving on to what can be. And in our life, as God began to speak to us and begin to talk to us about launching this new church, there were lots of days and nights where we said, yes, we are. No, we're not. Yes, we are. No, we're not. No, we're not. No, there is no way. Yes, we are. No, we're not. Yes, we could, maybe, I don't know. Okay. And we came to the conclusion that we needed to one more time step out in faith and go, you know what? We got to go after what can be. We got to go after, because Las Vegas is a city that is so broken. 93% of that city is not connected to an evangelical church. 93% is not connected to an evangelical church. It has the 5th largest homeless population in the entire city. Over $5 million is done every year in the sex industry legally, and $5 billion with a B dollars are generated every year, annually, from the stuff that happens that's not legal. So we knew that God was calling us to that. We knew that's something that we needed to look at, but was still kind of on the fence. And then I remember this night I had a dream. And now here, before you write me off, they go, oh, we had a dream. There we go. There it is. Of course, that's always like okay, I had a dream, and I went on and did. Now listen, before you start freaking out and labeling me that guy, there's the dream guy. Here's what I did, but it's not really. But here's why it's not really. I don't dream. When I go to bed at night, I just wake up the next day. It's awesome. It's amazing. I just wake up. What you dream about? Nothing. It was amazing. And on the rare occasion that I do dream, it's really weird. It's like a polar bear in a hot air balloon feeding gummy bears to kids. It's like, why was the hot air balloon with the polar bear, and why were the gummy bears with the kids? And that doesn't mean nothing at all. So for me to have a dream and to be able to remember a dream was significant. And I knew in this moment when I woke up from the dream that I'm going to tell you about, that I knew was God. And in this dream, here's what I could see. Here's what I could visualize. I could see the cross, and it was huge. I mean, it was just huge. And it looked to me like the cross probably looked like it had been thrown to heaven, or it was kind of making its way down onto basically planet Earth. Just trick with me. I know this is going to get weird for a second. But here's what I began to see. When I began to see the cross make its way into like the Earth's atmosphere, it began to it was coming at such a tremendous rate of speed that it was like in flames around the outside, almost like, have you seen when a shuttle comes in re-entry and the heat shield in flames? I mean, that's what I could see. That's how fast it was moving. And it was coming, and the bottom of the cross was coming down. And as it approached this huge kind of hilly landscape, this mountainside, I saw the cross turn from the bottom going down to the top going down. And I saw it, and it slammed into the top of this hillside at like a 45-degree angle. So you could see the back of the cross was sticking into the air. It was in at like a 45. The right arm of the cross was kind of sticking up, and it was a huge explosion. And then kind of in the next moment, I saw thousands and thousands and thousands of people. They'd come up to see what this was all about. And I mean, it was so many that I couldn't count. I'm not going to say millions, but it was a lot of people that came up to see it. And as they did, what happened is this huge windstorm kicked up. And when I say windstorm, visualize, if you will, like the biggest tornado you've ever seen on like the Weather Channel. And it was huge, and it ripped up over the top of this mountain. And what happened is people began to get picked up by this and thrown off the top of this hillside. It was kind of graphic in that. And here's what happened. As it did, everything around began to shake. It was rumbling across this hillside. But as it did, I saw the cross begin to rumble, and it began to kind of move around. And when something happened, the cross, it anchored into the top of the hillside. And what happened is people just started running to the cross, and they began to grab onto the cross. And that's how big it was. I'm seeing thousands and thousands of people on top of this cross. And then as the windstorm ripped up over the top of this hillside, everybody that was holding onto the cross didn't get blown away until it passed by. And then God began to show me, and he began to tell me, that's what I want this church to look like, that people will find their lives anchored in what I did for them on the cross. And I went to the cross on a hillside called Calvary. And because of what I did for them on the hillside called Calvary, anybody's life can be instantaneously changed by what I did for them. And I woke up and I said, the name of this church is going to be Anchor Hill Church, because of the dream that I had. And I woke up and I told her about the dream, and she was like, whoa, that's it. And we've been in ministry a long time, and one of the hardest things in ministry is like naming ministries. It's like, what are you going to call it? No, we're not calling it that. And you can think of reasons to not call it that. It's kind of like when you go to name your kids, and then you can think of somebody you don't like who has the name you just suggested. You're like, I ain't naming him that. That dude's a jerk. You know what I mean? So when I woke up and I said, God showed me this vision, this dream, it was crazy. And she was like, yeah. And so we just knew that we were supposed to go to Vegas. And what's interesting, God showed us that it was a picture of the silhouette, the outlining mountains all around Vegas. And so we decided to go for it. But here was the thing. We said, okay, we're going to embrace what can be. We're going to leave behind what is. But here was the problem. Nobody was going with us at the time. A few people, we told about it, and they were like, that's cute. Yeah, that's a good idea. You should go do that. I'm staying here. You should go. And nobody was on board. Nobody had given us $1. And I remember the day where we decided, are we really going to do this? Because if we're really going to do this, we both know what that means. I have to go in, and I have to resign a job. And I have to go tell them, I feel like I'm resigning this job, this amazingly, perfectly good job that pays plenty of money to take care of our kids. To leave it behind to make nothing. I remember walking in and telling them, okay, this is what we're going to do. And it was amazing, the timing of it all. That when we took the leap, and we said, we're going to do this. I feel like you're calling us to this. I feel like we're supposed to do this. And the moment we kind of like took the leap and said, we can't go back, we resigned the job, all of a sudden people started saying, man, I feel like God spoke to me. I feel like God talked to me. I feel like if you're going to go, I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to go too. If you're going to do this, I feel like I'm going to resign and I'm going to go too. We had a family. He was a chiropractor. We had 3 businesses, and he said, I'm selling it all, and I'm taking my 4 kids, and we're coming to Vegas. And the great people of faith, we always said, don't you dare. You need to hold on a second. We said, you need to wait a year. and make sure this thing is going to work. And they were like, no, don't you be robbing our blessing. I was like, well, go ahead then, fine, if that's what you're going to do. But don't be getting mad at me if it doesn't work, because God told you. Don't come to us, because you sold your businesses and took your kids out of school. I didn't ask you to do nothing. Just Jesus. Talk to him about it. But we started getting these people just lining up and saying, we want to give money to this. We want to support this thing. We want to come. We want to move. And when we ended up doing this, there was 15, 18 people that decided we're going to pick up. We're selling our business. We're selling our house. We're quitting our jobs. And we're going to move to Vegas. And we were like, this is unbelievable. This is exciting. And we were like, man, we're going to get there. It's going to be good. Everything is going to work out great. They're going to love Vegas, every single one of them. And we get there, and we can't find a place to host the church. Nobody wants to let us use it. The number one location that we wanted, I thought this was going to be the place. I was going to walk in there and be like, here you go, sir. This is where you can start your church. There you go. Praise the Lord. Bless them. Like they're Christian, And so we couldn't find a location. All the people that moved into the city hated it. They couldn't stand the city. They were overwhelmed by the amount of people with neck tattoos. It's like threw them off. They're like, there's a lot of neck tattoos here and personalized license plates. That's what Vegas is known for. They struggled in the city, and one of the things you can't have when you're trying to launch a new church is you got to let as many people as humanly possible know about what you're trying to do. And these people were so shell-shocked by the city that instead of interacting with more people, the only people they'd interact with was the people that they already knew. And so they wouldn't tell anybody about the church. They would just hang out with each other. And we're like, you can't do that. Well, you have to meet some other people. You got to go to the gym. You got to go to Target. You got to do something. Vegas has Targets. I know people don't know that. They're like, oh, there's people that live there. It's crazy. Yeah, there are. We can't find a location. We can't get this thing going. The people who are there are second-guessing why they're there. Half of them are battling serious depression if we weren't on the verge of battling it ourselves. And we're struggling, but we're called. We're being obedient, but it's painful. Sometimes God will call you to obedience, and it will be one of the most painful things you'll ever walk through. But the pain doesn't mean you're not supposed to walk through it. We finally get a location, and this principal, man, he loved Jesus. It was hard to find one in Vegas, a principal who loved Jesus, but we found a principal who loved Jesus. And he said, yeah, absolutely, you can move in here. But the problem is there's another church that's already in here, but they're planning to move in just like 2 months. So you can move in 2 months. So we go back to the team. We're like, we did it, guys. We got a location. We've had 70 no's, but we finally got our yes. We're starting our church in September. They're moving out. And then they call us back, the church that was supposed to move out. And they said, actually, our building was delayed. We can't move out in September. It's going to be October. Church, we're starting in October. It's going to be great. I can't wait for it to be October. But Priscilla and I both knew this, that if it were to go beyond October, what that basically means is we're not starting until January because nobody starts a church in the holidays. That is not the time to be starting a new church. Of course, they called us back and said, no, it's not going to be. It's going to be November. No, it's going to be December. No, it's going to be January. No, it's going to be February. So we've got all these people who have picked up their lives, and we come back to them and go, guys, guess what? We're going to start in 6 months. But you said we were starting the church in September. See, what happened was there's some people in the room, and then they said, no, we're starting in February. But it became the struggle because how we saw this thing going is not how any of it was going. And we're doing our best, and we're keeping the people together, and this whole time we're going, was this the right move? Was this the right call? Did we really give up everything we just gave up? And we can't even get the doors open. We can't even find a place to do this. We've got these people. I don't know if you can imagine this, but I cannot underscore the pressure that you feel, even though we know it's God, to know that 18 people sold houses, quit jobs, took their kids out of school to move across the country to help you. The pressure of not being able to produce, the pressure of not being able to get it done in the timetable at which we wanted and having to come back and still be people of faith. But we're not seeing it yet, but it's going to be good. We're not seeing it yet. It's going to be good. Not seeing it yet. And keeping them together, and they're struggling, and it's hard. And we want to just get this thing going, and they're questioning, should I go back? And we're like, I don't know. It's just this season where it's not working out the way that we thought it would work. Then all of a sudden we get the word that for sure that we are going to be able to get this thing open, and it's going to be amazing. And we thought February is going to be it. We're going to open our church on Valentine's Day. It's going to be a great day. It's going to be people are going to be happy or depressed, depending on your relational status. It's going to be a great day. We're finally going to get the doors open. We've been waiting for 6 months. It's going to be amazing. And then our very first day, it was amazing. Man, the place was packed out, and then we're high-fiving like, yeah, this is what we waited for. This is God's faithfulness. Look at this, guys. Isn't this great? And we're taking pictures and selfies, and we're talking about it. And that was the first Sunday, and then the second Sunday came. It was still pretty good, but it's about half the people. And then the third Sunday came, and it was less, and then less, and then less. And then we're in this thing, and we're looking at it, and this is nothing like what we envisioned. Because the truth is, for our ministry tenure, we've been pastors 15 years prior to doing this. For the most part, anything we ran grew. Nothing that we ran did not grow. And not only was this not growing, it was shrinking. And it appeared that it was dying, and people weren't coming that much. And every 5 to 6 weeks, we might see somebody. And there was one time for a 3-month period where I'd preach my face off. I got it back, but that just means I thought I was preaching good. And I give these invitations for people to come to know Christ. I say, if you want to come to know Christ as your personal Savior, you know how we do it, raise your hand, but nothing. 3 months, no one was coming. No one was raising their hands. And I was like, I know that was a good sermon. It is you, not me. Because that junk was good. I was amening myself. I was amening when I wrote. I was like, that's good. Clearly, you're crazy. Nothing. Nobody's joining our leadership team. Nobody. We're like, hey, get on our team, yada, yada. They're like, no, I'm not doing that. For months and months and months, people are not coming. People are not being a part of this. No one is joining the team. People are not connecting. And if it wasn't hard enough, probably about 5 months in, because everybody kept saying you just got to get to about 5 or 6 months. It kind of changes. You kind of turn a corner. At like 5 or 6 months, we had 30 people in 1 month either deploy or have a job transfer. Most of our entire worship team left. Not because they didn't like us. They got transferred. And so we're sitting back looking at this thing 6 months in, and we're supposed to turn this corner, and oh boy, did we turn a corner. Just not the corner we wanted to turn. We didn't gain people. We're losing people. And then I remember at one point we're watching the news one day. As we're watching the news, we're hearing about this gang-related shooting at a high school. And wouldn't you know what high school would be? The high school we're using. Now all of a sudden, the community has connected this school to our church. And people are like, I'm not going down there. That's not a good community. And as this was going on, there was the number one location I was talking about earlier. As this whole thing was happening, I kept calling them because I love this location. I felt like that was our location. I felt like that's where we were supposed to be. And they kept saying, no, Pastor, no. No, there's a church in here till 2019. No. Please stop calling. We'll call you. Stop harassing us. You can't have it. Quit calling us. You're freaking us out. You're making the secretaries nervous every time you call. Just stop it. You can't have it. You got to wait 3 years. Get over it. I was like, okay. So I called them again, and they said, no. What don't you understand about the year 2019? That's when they're leaving. Stop calling. And I remember in that moment, it all felt wrong. It felt dead. It felt like it wasn't worth it. It felt like it wasn't worth the sacrifice. It felt like it wasn't worth listening. It felt like it wasn't worth doing. It felt like failure. At every turn, it just seemed like this was about to be another church flop. It felt like depression. And what do you do when what God has called you to doesn't look like what you're experiencing? And I remember stepping back in that moment and God speaking that into us. What do you do when what I've called you to do doesn't look like what you're experiencing? And there's a lot of different ways we can break it down, but when it all boils down to it, there's two things you can do. You can quit or you can keep going. That's it. You can preach a lot of different ways, and we can get all excited up in here, but when you boil it down to its simplest terms and understanding, you can either quit, pack up shop, or you can stay on your grind, and you can keep believing, and you can keep going, and you can keep pressing on. And we made this determination that we just couldn't quit, that we had to keep going. And if God is giving you something, the first time you hit a wall, if you quit, that does not mean that God didn't call you to what he called you to. You have to step back and evaluate if you're gonna quit or if you're going to keep going, because sometimes your progress isn't obvious. And just because you're seeing what you're seeing, and just because you're not seeing progress doesn't mean your faith isn't working. It doesn't mean that God didn't call you to it. So what did we do? We kept acting called. We kept acting like God was going to come through. It wasn't easy to do. There were some days that we'd have to get up and make ourselves tell our team, this is going to be great. People are going to get saved. This city is going to be changed. But behind closed doors, we were like, we're crazy. Ain't nothing happening. We're lying to these people right now. Bunch of liars up in this place trying to come up in here. I wish you would tell me one more time, this place is going to be packed up. Ain't nobody going to church right now. No, it's going to be great. Hallelujah. Lying to us up here in this church. But what we did is we just stayed. You know what? God said it. We're not seeing it, but he said it. So we're going to keep talking vision, and we're going to keep speaking faith, and we're not seeing it yet, but just because we're not seeing it yet doesn't mean it's not going to happen. Just because we're not experiencing yet doesn't mean it's not going to happen. Just because it's not good yet doesn't mean it's not God. And so we stayed with it, and we stayed on it, and we just kept motivating and kept going. And I remember one night we were out of town, and I woke up, and this is what God kind of like put into my spirit. He said, when you wake up tomorrow, I want you to call that other school again. And I was like, oh my God. I guess it'd be oh my you. I said, last time we had a conversation, it went something like, get it through your head, it's gonna be 2019. So pastor, stop harassing us. But I felt like God said, you need to call them. I was like, I'll have Priscilla call them. I'm not calling them no more. Somebody gonna call, but it ain't gonna be me. I'm not calling anybody else ever again from that school. And so I remember getting up the next morning and I was like, hey. And they said, they answered the phone and, and I asked to speak to the person. They said, speak. And I was like, well, it's John Bohr. Oh, hey, pastor. I was like, hey, how you doing? And I got the person and I said, this is maybe a little crazy, but any changes with the school? And they said, you know what? Yes. I said, don't mess with me right now. I said, no. You want to know what happened? Their building program was cut by 60%. And the building that was going to take them 2.5, 3 years to do, it's actually going to be done in February. So if you want, you can take possession of this new location, the location that we wanted, come February. And it was like November at this time. They're like, do you want it? I said, no, I'm good. I don't want it. What do you mean? I've called you 90 times. So I remember in that moment, it was like, at that one moment, there was like a glimmer of hope. I said, well, maybe just maybe God could do something. Maybe just maybe something's changing here. And so we were out of town, but we said, you know what, guys? This may seem weird. We're going to pick this church up from where it is. We've been doing this thing about 9 months, and we're going about 20 minutes away. And what's crazy is where this church is situated. When you drive up to it, it's the exact same view of that dream. It's up on a hillside. You can see the entire city of Las Vegas, and it's nestled almost at the top of this mountain range. It was crazy. And I remember on January 15th of this year, so about 7.5 months ago, We said, we're going to relaunch this thing. We're going to redo this thing. We still got vision. We still got faith. We're a little beat up. We're a little bruised. We're a little traumatized. But do you know what? We're going to keep on going. And I remember we were launching this thing January 15th, and there was this big mail out that was going to go out. And I remember we were doing like a preview kind of a week before. We didn't want to tell anybody about it on January 8th. And on January 8th, a bunch of people showed up that we'd never seen before. And I remember we go, oh man, the mailer went out too soon. We weren't ready for them. It's our very first service in here. We wanted to get like a practice run in, and we're going around to people, hey, did you get the mail out? They're like, no. You didn't? No. Did you get the mail out? No. Nobody got the mail out. These people just showed up. Then all of a sudden, we relaunched this thing, and then people start, instead of showing up one time and not coming back, they started showing up and they came again. And then they came again, and this time they brought a friend, and then their friends began to bring friends, and people began to come. And what was crazy is from the months of January to May, 120 people gave their lives to Christ. In the first 3 weeks we moved there, we saw more people give their lives to Christ than those 3 months where we couldn't get anything. All of a sudden, there was an energy to the room. All of a sudden, there was life to the room. We weren't doing anything different, but people were coming, and they're bringing people. And then we're starting to hear stories of people coming off of drugs, and families that were broken being changed, and marriages being healed, and bodies being healed. And the church was making the difference in the lives of people. Then all of a sudden, the church has doubled in size. The leadership team has doubled in size. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, we're beginning to see what God spoke to us. We're beginning to see the truth of the matter that God told us to embrace what could be. And I believe we're just beginning to see what God can do. And during all this, it's opened our eyes to the power of the church. It's opened our eyes to the power of why it's so critical for churches to be opened all over America. And for our church, not only does it now look like it's not going to close its doors, it looks like it's going to thrive. It looks like it's going to be everything that God told us it was going to be. But churches need to be opened. Cities need to be impacted. People need hope. Heaven and hell are a reality. And people are going to both destinations. Destinations is the word I was attempting to say. We have got to do our part as the church to get as many people to populate heaven as possible. And I believe that the church is still the best solution for this. And I love that this is a church that invests in church. I believe that this is a church that wants to see churches started. I love that this is a church that sees the impact of local churches. And can you imagine what our country, what our world could look like if our cities were populated full of life-giving churches? Can you imagine how different the world could look? But that will only happen when people embrace and churches embrace what can be. What can be. I wonder if you could answer that question tonight. What has God been speaking to you about? And the only thing that's kept you from moving is what is. You've seen what can be. God told you to start that business. God told you to start that ministry. God spoke to you about that relationship. Fill in the blank of what it could be for you. So many people, I wonder if the only reason that you haven't experienced all that can be is you've struggled with the pain of leaving behind what is. So I wonder today if we could step back and not only dream about churches, but I want you to dream about your life.